Next, we're going to discuss links. A web page can be well designed, but if we can't use one web page to navigate elsewhere on the web, there's not a lot of purpose unless it's just a landing page of some sort. So links are essentially snippets of HTML that can give web browsers directions to get from one page to another. And those are produced using the anchor tag. And the anchor tag typically has an A associated with it, A for anchor, like this right there. There are three types of links that we are going to discuss. There are absolute, document relative, and root relative links. Each one of these functions slightly different. So absolute links go to a specific location. As an example, if someone wanted to mail you a letter, they would need your mailing address. So here I've got an address right down here that I drew up. My name, business name, 123 Meat Street. This is a fictional address, of course, but this address is the only way someone could mail me a letter. If they plugged different numbers in or were more general, it would never arrive to me. So it needs to be a unique address. Similarly, every web page has a unique address called a URL. If I were to go online and I'll use the Daytona State College website as an example here. This up here is the URL of the daytonastate.edu webpage. URL is an acronym for Uniform Resource Locator. Now this URL is an absolute link. It's not displaying up here at the top, but an absolute link starts with HTTP : couple backslashes like that. Any absolute URL, even if it doesn't display up here because they do consolidate, it's always going to start with the HTTP. So you're always going to use an absolute link anytime you're linking to a web page outside of the web page you're designing. So if I needed this to go to another location outside of my website that I'm building, I would have to use the HTTP to describe it. Document relative links, which are the next type of link, is like giving someone, like your neighbor, directions. Like, how do I get to Susie Q's house? Oh, she's 3 doors down on the right-hand side of the street. When someone is familiar with their surroundings, they can get an easier gauge on where specifically they may need to go in relation to where their location is. That's how document relative links. So this pertains to web pages that are a part of the same website. So in that case, if you recall, I had made an about page. I haven't put much on it yet, but I did name it about, and both my home page, the index, and my about page are located on the website that I've produced thus far. So in relation to my index.html, to make a link to my about page, this tells the browser how to find a page relative to my current location, and in this case, relative to the current page. So this is the only thing you need for this is the file's name. So about.html, down here in the properties panel, there's a link section. I can type in about.html. You'll notice that it's appearing like a link at this point. I could also point to that file. So I could grab my little, looks like the crosshairs are a bullseye in a way. I could point to my about.html document, or I could click the browse to file. That will open up a window, and I could select it from this list and say, okay. Any one of these options is acceptable. And you'll notice that I do have my anchor tag. It's referencing the about.html document. The text that's visible is in the middle, and then that A tag closes. So document relative links can be finicky because they are completely dependent upon the location of the page containing the link. So if I were to move that page to another part of my site, such as, we'll say I put it in a folder accidentally, it could run into some problems if I don't click update. I'm going to cancel out of this. I did not want to relocate that, so I will put it. In relation to links, and this links pertain to more than just one HTML page to another. It can pertain to CSS, it can pertain to images, other coding. Something to keep in mind, because Dreamweaver does catch that you're relocating content, it does have some safeguards in place. Now, if you decide you need to relocate outside of Dreamweaver, here's my root folder. If I were to move my about into a folder here and not inform Dreamweaver of that, you'll notice here it's not telling me to look in the CSS file folder, which is where I placed that. If I preview this in a browser, I'll come down to my preview in browser. I'll click Google Chrome. It will prompt me to save. I'm going to say yes. If I click that About page, you'll notice I'm getting an error. It's not finding that file. So that's a problem. That's problematic. So anytime you need to, we'll say, play housekeeping with your content, that needs to be done specifically within Dreamweaver to ensure that no issues occur. Root relative links are the last link type. These are also called site root relative links, and this tells a browser how to get from one page to another within the same site, very much as document relative links do. But in this case, the link describes the path relative to the site's root folder. So that's the folder that contains everything. In this case, this is my root folder here, Janae's website that I have on my desktop here. That's what that's pertaining to. So without a root folder set up, if you recall going to Site, Manage Sites, we had set up a local site root folder. And when you load this to your host, there would be a root folder there as well. It's pertaining to that folder specifically. Now, there's one major drawback to root relative links. Typically, they don't work when you test them on your own computer. Like, you will get like a file not found type of error. That's because root relative links only work when a website resides on a web server. So that the root relative pertains to the root on the host. So that is a host-only type of link. We won't need to worry too much about that in regards to how we design our sites. If you're new to web design, parts of a URL you will want to be conscientious of. So that HTTP, this portion specifies the protocol, which is the communication technology a browser uses to interact with a web server. The HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. If you've ever seen HTTPS, such as if you've been doing banking or you need to input a username and password to access parts of the site, the S on the end pertains to it being a secure web page, meaning it encrypts the communication between the browser and a web server so that anyone who's looking for your information can't see what you're sending and receiving. So it's a security measure. the www.daytonastate.com. This tidbit is the web address of the computer sharing Daytona's content. So somewhere there's a host hosting this site, and that specific address, that unique absolute link, is taking me to the school's website. If I were to click on any of these icons, for instance, we'll click the academic calendar. You'll notice that academic calendar, this bit in slashes, this represents a folder. This is a folder or a directory for this section of information. So as an example, if I wanted to have a gallery page designed and I placed that in the images folder, this would be www.mywebsite.com/images/ and then whatever the HTML document is. And in this case, fall 2016.html is the name of the web page that the browser is opening to display for us. So a couple things regarding links to make sure that they're functioning properly. Most, if not all, websites use the file name index.html for the home page. So if you'll notice, if I go to the home page of Daytona State, it just says daytonastate.edu. What you're not actually seeing is the fact that it's actually daytonastate.edu/index.html. So that index file, all web browsers recognize that as the first page that should be visible. Typically, most websites have many pages applied, but they will always know that the index.html is the first one that should be shown, not the about, not anything else that should be present, only this one. The I in index is case sensitive. It should be all lowercase. Don't do a capital I, don't do all caps, because that can run into problems depending upon your host and what browsers you are using. With links, I'll type in a link for my Meet portfolio here. So if I wanted to include an absolute link, we talked about how that must have HTTP, the colon, the 2 slashes, www. I'll type in google.com in this instance, just to convey how this works. Now that I've typed in my link, there are a couple different ways that you can preview your content in a browser. You could come down here and click on real-time preview. This particular preview list does open it up in a browser, but you will notice that it doesn't give the URL that you're expecting. Now, the nice thing about real-time preview is if I decide I'd like to make some alterations to my code, and I will shrink this down a touch just so that you can get a little bit of a visual. As an example, if I decided I wanted to alter my quote, you can see it's a little bit trickier to get to when it's in a smaller screen. So if I wanted to alter my text color, we'll make it a really bright red. You can see that the real-time preview lets you automatically make that update. But the only problem with this is if you're linking to pages outside of your website, if I click this, it's not going to preview the link that I had typed in here, which is google.com. So if you want to actually preview the web page in a browser, go to your files, right-click, open in browser. I'm going to pick Google Chrome, and you'll notice now if I click this one, because I'm actually giving it a preview in Google Chrome, it does what I'm asking it to do. So it does go to that web page that I asked it to go to. You'll notice here the / and C. This information just means that I am previewing it, but it is not hosted. It's being hosted on my computer itself. So that / file / C, that's just saying that it's on my C drive. They're not valid on the web. It's just a temporary address that Dreamweaver is producing as a placeholder link that it will rewrite later once it is hosted. But it does give me a little bit more functionality. Widen this back out again. Okay, so with absolute links, you must type it in manually. If you wanted to link to a specific place, you could copy it from online that you'd like. So I'll go ahead and copy this text, and I'll change my link here. HTTP, same idea. For document relative links, we already showed you how to do that with the about. You can type it in, you can drag specifically where it's located here in the local files, you can browse for it. Regardless, you're going to get the same result. It's going to plug that link information in on your behalf. There are other link types as well. If I wanted to make contact, say click it and it gives me an email address, I could go to Insert, Email Link, kind of towards the middle of the list. I'll click that. It asks me what we want the text to be, so I'm using my contact link for that. And I'll type my email address in, so janae@bacon.com. Click OK. You'll notice the link is a little different. Instead of just giving me a reference to an HTML document or an outright URL, it's giving me mail to : and then applying that email address. If I put that in and then preview it in a browser, not in the real-time preview, it will give me the opportunity to click it, and it will open up Outlook, or at least save it so that you can use it in whatever your preferred email server happens to be. Once you have a link set up, down here in the Properties panel, you'll notice that there is a few options that you have the ability to alter here. The title is going to give me like a little hover over, so that if I don't click on a link, but perhaps I want to have an idea of what it leads me to, I can type in a brief description. So I'll type in all about bacon. The reason adding a title can be beneficial is that, and this can be done on images as well, you'll notice I have an option for a title here. But the reason that this is a beneficial field to consider filling in, search engines like the title property. So it lets them know the purpose of that link. So it could help web pages be a little easier to find online. It can also let people who use screen readers, such as those who perhaps are blind, it gives them the ability to use a screen reader, which is a program that helps those with vision problems surf the web, also benefit, because the title property can be read out loud, and then that visitor will know where that web page is going to take them. The target property deals with how a browser displays the destination page when you click on a link. By default, if you click on a link, the new page will open on top of the page that is currently visible. If you want it to open in a new window, perhaps you don't want it to open right on top of the initial page, you want to open it up in a new window because it's perhaps related, you would want to set that out to choose the blank option, and this will open it in a new separate window. So I'll go ahead and target that as blank. There are several other options here, but honestly, the default or blank, these are the only two that are really used these days. So you don't really need to mess with all of the other settings because they don't get used very often. Let's preview again. Go back to Files, go back to my index page. I will right click on the file, open in a browser, Chrome. So if I hover over, perhaps this is a setting I have turned off on my browser. I'll have to look into that. Sometimes it gives a hover over icon just for fun. You know what? I want to go ahead and add one to my dancing bacon. Hit save, preview again. There we go. So you can see it does give me a hover over on my image. For whatever reason, it's not wanting. There we go. Now it's working. I don't know what was going on there. So I'll click About. You see how it opened that page up in a new tab. So that underscore blank opens it up separately. Whereas you can recall Meet Portfolio did not. That was set to the default. If I click that, the Daytona State website, which I had plugged in, automatically opens on top of my web page. So if you're linking to a website outside of your website, such as reference links for your first assignment, you will want to make sure that you're using the underscore blank target property. Another type of link that can be produced is linking within a web page. Typically, when you click a link, it loads a new web page. But what if you wanted to click to a specific spot on the same page? This is used often for long pages of content, like an FAQ page, where it'll maybe have a list of questions at the top, and then you click the question and it scrolls down the page to reach an answer. This is done using IDs and linking to IDs. So as an example, I am going to rework my Meet portfolio. Right now I have it set to link to the school webpage. I'm going to just delete that for right now. But I'm going to make a new page specifically for this. So I'm going to make a copy of my index page, and I'm just going to do a bit of editing to that copy. So I'm going to right click, edit, copy, and then click down here in the bottom, right click, edit, right click, edit, duplicate. There we go. So now I've got an index copy, and I'm going to rename it Portfolio. So I'll double click it. That will open it up into Dreamweaver. And I'm going to just make some alterations. I'm going to get rid of my picture. Go ahead and alter my header. I don't think I need this class at the moment, so I'm going to click None. And I'm just going to duplicate the content several times so that it's a long page of stuff. So at this point, I'm going to just type in some names that can act as headers. So I might say beef, and I'll make it an H2 just to make it stand out, maybe an H3, just so it looks different from this header. So beef, maybe down here I'll do pork. Scroll down a little bit. Poultry, I think that's spelled wrong, but that's fine. Okay. I'm going to give each of these sections, I'm also going to make a temporary, we'll call it my meat portfolio. And this is a great opportunity for me to maybe use the little bit of code that I hid initially. So I'm going to cut that from here, from my navigation bar, and in my P tag here, I'm just going to place it right there. So this is like my secondary navigation. So I want to turn each of these into links. So I'm going to come down to link, and I'm going to type a hashtag that represents each section. So hashtag beef, hashtag pork, and these need to have typical, you can use underscores and such, but I'm just going to type in other without the question mark, because code gets weird when you start adding other punctuation. So I've made a linking ID to each one of these items. Now I need to assign an ID to each header that I want it to bounce to. So I'll type in the ID here, beef. This one will be pork. You'll see here, as I type these in, it adds the ID to each one of these links, or each one of these points, rather. I'm not adding the hashtag here. I'm just typing the ID itself. There we go. So now we have a link, and we have an area that it's going to snap to. So let's give it a quick preview. I don't know if it'll work in the real-time preview or not, but let's give it a try. Save changes, yes. And yes. Okay, so now I'll click pork. It comes us to pork. If I click other, it brings us to other. If I wanted to, maybe put like a return to top link at the bottom of each section, I could put an ID up here near the top, and that way every time I click a button that returns me to the top, it brings me back to that navigation, so I don't have to do a lot of scrolling. But you can see that by using those IDs, it's allowing me to navigate not just between multiple web pages, but even to different places on the same page. If I need to remove a link of any kind, like change its destination or just take it out, it's no longer valid, all I have to do is come down to my link and delete the content. If I wanted to change my link, right now this is still linking to DaytonaState.edu. Obviously, I want that to link back to the portfolio at this point. I can hit delete. I can pick from a list of different places that I've used previously, which is a really nice add-in. I'm just going to drag and tell it, hey, here's my portfolio. And now this link would lead to this page. You can control the basic look of links from the links category in the page property window. If I click on page properties down here, there's a section specifically for links. Link font will automatically, right now it's set to automatically adopt whatever is going on with the page itself. But I do have the ability to alter that just like I did in the CSS Designer. I can change the size, the link color. I don't want it to maybe look like the default blue. There's nothing that looks more unprofessional on a web page when the designer didn't make time in their creativity to set up those links to look like something other than the default HTML. So I could set my link color to never underline. I'll click apply. You can see that set that up there. No more underline. My link color, I perhaps want it to match what I've set up here already. And you can see it's kind of tricky to get it to select specifically. So I'm just going to pick a random red color here just to get me started. Click apply. If I want a rollover, meaning if on a desktop I want the color to change slightly, I can set it up to maybe change to a slightly different color. Maybe I'll pick orange for right now. I'll click apply. Visited links, I want them to look the same. You'll notice in the preview that visited links were showing up in purple, and I don't necessarily want purple, so perhaps I just want to roll over and I'll leave visited links alone. This is something that you can alter, but it's not necessary. I'll click apply and okay. Give that another test. There we go. So now my active links, which is about, meet, portfolio, and contact, you can see that those have that rollover, as do these. To make sure that all those changes I made get added to my entire website and not just this single page, again, I would want to take these styles that I've produced, cut it from here, come over to my CSS document, and paste them back in. That way it becomes a permanent part of my entire website and not just the web page itself. Then I would come back up here and I would remove the excess style that is no longer visible because I relocated it. So you can style each link state individually. Most browsers, like I showed you just a moment ago, it's just going to be a plain blue until you visited the page, then it turns purple. Again, I cannot stress enough how much I do not want to see that. With the rollover or your hover effect, that looks great on a desktop, but keep in mind that these days there's a lot of visitors using phones and tablets, and using a finger, you're not going to be able to roll over content. You're only going to be able to click it because you're using a finger and not a mouse. So in those instances, keep in mind, how are your viewers going to be viewing this website? If it's going to be on a mobile device, is it worth taking the time to add in that extra style if it's not going to be seen? The active link, don't need to worry about that. It's basically when you click and hold your cursor down on an item, like click and hold. I can't think of any instance where someone actually does that on a web page, so it's really not a style that is necessary to worry about. Now, something also to think about, since web surfers are accustomed to thinking of underlined text as a big click me sign, essentially, think twice before removing underlines from links. If your navigation is difficult to recognize as navigation without that underline, it could make it difficult to realize that that is something that can be clicked on. But as a personal choice, just for me, I don't care for the appearance of the underline, so I always make sure that it's big enough to be recognized as navigation, or it's set apart in some way that I don't need to rely upon that underline. Now, again, I did this in the page properties panel. Let me cancel this. All of these items are also available in the CSS Designer. You can style links, and I'll click here on the A. All of those options such as changing color, letter spacing, font size, etc. All of that is available to you already in the CSS Designer panel. To distinguish or to control how a link looks for different states, such as link, visited, hover, active, you would need to dip a little bit deeper into the CSS pool, into what's called a pseudo class. And that's that little colon between each of these items. So A : active, that's the A tag in the active state. So adding that colon between them makes it easy for you to do in CSS Designer. If you didn't make any of these, and we'll hit the delete key to just delete our styles real quick. You can see it went back to default. And I'll add a selector. I'll type A : You'll notice that it pops up all kinds of automatic options for you. The link, visited, hover, and active are those that were visible in the properties panel, but there are others as well. I recommend just sticking to the top 3. Those are going to be really all that you would need. So keep in mind, all of those properties can be accessed in multiple locations. Links are important, but they're not difficult to include as long as you're conscientious about what types of links you're using, making sure that for absolute links, you're including the HTTP : and then www wherever you're going.com. Otherwise, it's very intuitive to work with files within Dreamweaver or within your root folder, as well as including IDs to navigate amidst a single web page.